these guys on the panel, my very esteemed colleagues, do represent large businesses in the supply chain, in the horticulture supply chain. I don't represent a large business in the horticulture supply chain, and each year, this is my third year presenting at ABARES, I always feel like a little bit of an imposter because I am a small farmer, and I always wonder when we're talking about the $100 billion plan and we're having all of these conversations, these conceptual, how are we going to get to $100 billion? I always think, am I relevant to that conversation? And then I think about it, and actually I'm the grower that would send my apples to Jeff Thompson. I'm the person that would love to send you my seconds of cauliflowers and see if you can pre-pack or do something amazing with that. And I have actually supplied into a number of the businesses that are around Michael Rogers' table at the Australian Fresh Produce Alliance. So I think I'm very relevant to the conversation, and sometimes we don't necessarily hear from the smaller grower. So last year they said $100 billion, and I came out and said tell them that they're dreaming. I think on our current trajectory with the disasters that we've been seeing across Australia, we're probably not going to make it. But I guess the number's not what's important. The idea was that agriculture would together rally around a vision, and it is a vision, and it's a good vision. It says that we want to grow. It's come up with some ideas as to how we need to grow, and if we break that down into what that means on my farm, it meant that I was supposed to just double my horticultural production. I am the horticulture president at the Victorian Farmers Federation, which for a little period of time was a bit of a lie because I had actually tried to get out of horticulture. So we're fattening lambs on our property now, trying to diversify. We've got a little retail shop where we supply through our little market garden, because actually I couldn't make horticulture make money for me. And I think that there's something wrong with the framework that I'm operating in. If I've got the soil and I actually have the water, as Minister Littleproud said, just add water and everything will be cool. Well, I had the water, had the land, and had the gumption and the desire to do something that was higher value than some of the other things that we could do on our farm. So first I dipped out of growing cauliflower and broccoli and cabbage because we just couldn't get the labour. I'm a bit of a speaker about Labor, and I'm happy to pick up on David's sentiments and have a bit of a bash of the government, because all of the things that all of the speakers have been talking about can all exist or do all exist in a framework that the government has a huge responsibility for. So we got our $100 billion plan, and then we had a whole coalition government come out and sign the piece of paper that said, yes, we're behind it. We've got the Prime Minister himself has signed on to a commitment that they want to see the agriculture industry grow. But that means that they have to do something about it, because I think we're moving past the point of lip service. It's not just about saying this is a vision that we want to reach. It's actually about creating the necessary things and frameworks, ideas, pathways, and an operational plan. It's all well and good to have your strategy, have your vision, but you need an operational plan. And a lot of the things that the speakers have been discussing are part of that operational plan that the government absolutely has the need to be part of and the obligation to support. So when we're talking about biological farming and the amazing things that that does for human health, what it does for our soil, what it does for carbon emissions, what it does in regards to our climate, that exists in a framework that should be rewarded not just by the consumers, but also by the government, because it does more. We do a public service, we do a public good as farmers and growers, whether we're sheep farmers or whether we're horticulturalists. So coming back to me growing cauliflower, okay, it was going to be too difficult. We'd lost money the year before, couldn't get the labour situation right. I've been one of those people saying ag visa, ag visa, ag visa. And what's really apparent since I first spoke at ABARES is this inertia. So we're saying all of the same things over and over and over again, and the only real change that we've seen in the last 5 years is everything that's been led by industry. So it's the industry leaders who go out and they innovate and they do amazing things and they open up export markets, and we think outside the square to create this growth in the industry. But you can't just sign if you're the Prime Minister and say you want to support it. You've actually got to do something meaningful towards that. So me growing cauliflower, right? How am I going to grow cauliflower, and how is that going to be profitable on my farm when I've had this issue with labour? Like, water's cool, not for pretty much anybody else in the country, but for me water is something that is a abundance on my farm. It never seems to stop raining. In fact, it's almost the problem on my farm. How am I going to do this? How am I going to make money growing cauliflower? Luckily tapped into an open-minded wholesaler who actually came to me and said, would you grow cauliflowers for me? And I said, I know what that means. That means that I outlay 400 grand, put it in the ground, grow the crops, manage the climatic risk, manage the market risk, manage all the things, and then you'll say to me in 4 months' time or 3 months' time, I'll remember how you were growing those cauliflowers for me. I want you to sell them back to me now, and that was the agreement that we had. That really doesn't do much for me in regards to ensuring that I've mitigated some of those risks. So we looked at a vertical integration model, which means that actually it's kind of like the chicken meat model, where I get a seedling from the wholesaler, I get the fertiliser from the wholesaler, I get all of the inputs from the wholesaler, and then I lease back the land, the water, the infrastructure, and our expertise in growing it. Now, she could have gone out and tried to grow for herself, which she had done the previous season and lost a lot of money. She said, oh, it turns out the farming's actually pretty hard. Yeah, it is. The difference between her trying to grow for herself and then sell it, or me trying to grow from myself and then me sell it, when we merge those two models together, in fact, we can both be winners. So what we did to take out some of that risk is this model. But the way that it works, in fact, is that on a conservative average price of cauliflowers, she only needs to yield 50% for it to break even for her. This exact same pricing, the way that it works, when I got to give somebody an agency fee and whatever else, I have to do 80% yield to be able to break even, and then anything on top of that is where the sweet spot is and where your profits lie. So by merging together, we took that risk out of it for both of us, because I know how to grow the stuff, she knows how to sell the stuff, and we've spread that risk. So that's something that we did, and then we costed the whole thing out, and despite saying I need an ag visa, and I'm a bit annoyed that the government has an infatuation with the seasonal worker program. Righto, I'm going to adopt it. If that's all the government's giving me, well, we'll work with the seasonal worker program. That seasonal worker program is only possible on my farm now because of the joint venture that I've done with the wholesaler. I simply wouldn't be able to afford it just by myself, because the difference is about $4 or $5 an hour. And it's not because the rate of pay is different, but the fact that you need to use a third-party labour provider, the fact that I have a payroll tax component that I wouldn't have to pay if I was just employing directly, all of these little added extra things, the bureaucracy of becoming an approved employer, all of those extra things mean that you end up spending an extra $5 an hour. So again, that's how a government policy completely affects what we're doing on farm, despite the fact that we're trying in earnest, because if you give a farmer an opportunity, they will take it, and that we are used to taking risks, and we'll go out there and do it, but give us something to work with. So, give us a framework. I keep saying give us a framework. Who pays for the Department of Agriculture, just to start with? So we're talking about this notion of public sentiment and public good, and the fact that having a vibrant agricultural industry in this country is more than just the food output. It's more than just the tomatoes that are on the shelf. It's the underpinning of regional communities. It's food security. It means that we're net exporters. It means that when we have things like coronavirus, where we all might freak out and think that we're going to empty the supermarket shelves, that there's an abundance for Australians there if we ever needed to keep all of our food here. There's so many things that are of public benefit from the agriculture industry, and we just don't seem to tap into that well enough, because we're getting that bare minimum price. We get that bare minimum price all the time just to keep us viable, but we're not getting paid when we do things like improve the soils, which reduces carbon emissions. So, yeah, we've been talking about all of the ideas, but we still don't have a meaningful climate change or climate policy in this country. Talking about it for 5 years. We've been talking about labour shortages. I've been talking about it for 5 years, and I'm sure there were people talking about it for a long period before I started talking about it. We had a horticulture industry labour agreement announced by the government. They like to come out and stand next to each other and shake themselves on the back, come out with an announcement, and it turns out the horticulture industry labour agreement, as reported today by the Weekly Times, who was here before but not anymore, that it's not a thing. It's an announcement, there's an intention, but we don't have the back of house right. Generally, when I sell something from my farm, I've already got the back of house right. We've already grown the cauliflowers. We've got the cauliflowers in a carton or in a bin, and then that's when we go out and sell it. No, what the government likes to do is take our money or our investment that we put into the Department of Agriculture, or we put into our levy system, or we put into our workers, or we put into our pack houses, and then make announcements on the back of that. So horticulture industry labour agreement, still not really a thing. Agricultural visa, still not really a thing. Payments for carbon sequestration or natural capital payments for that type of thing. We talk about it, but nothing's actually happened. And those policies are very, very meaningful, because if David not only got paid for his excellent product, but what his services were for the environment, then that would really underpin the resilience in our farming businesses. But we're just not there. So we can talk about $100 billion. The number is actually irrelevant. But if we don't actually change the policies, we don't actually put in the frameworks, it's not going to mean anything other than what farmers have done for the last 100 plus years in this country, which is work it out for themselves, grow it for themselves, make opportunities for themselves, and that's what we do as farmers all of the time. So back to the funding of the Department of Agriculture. Now, I think that I've made a fair case for the fact that it's a public good. Well, farmers are paying for 50% of the costs of the Department of Agriculture. And that's the highest cost recovery out of any of the other government departments. So when they come out and they make an announcement that we're supporting you in bushfire, I just think to myself, are you really giving us back the money that we give to you already? Because no matter how you look at it, the farmer's paying for it. Whether it's the matched dollar that we get for R&D or the matched dollar that we get for the Department of Agriculture, it's coming out of our taxes anyway, and the growers are paying taxes too. So however you want to look at it, the farmers are paying for the policies, the farmers are paying for the fees, the services, all the things that are coming out, we're paying for it. And then the government gets to stand up and make announcements about things that they're doing to support agriculture. And I just find that a little bit offensive when we're the ones that are actually taking all of the risk. So I sat down and worked out how much my labour costs were going to be between me and the wholesaler, worked out whether or not there was going to be a margin, worked out whether or not the activity was going to be profitable, and then we agreed to do that together. Sometimes the politicians don't quite do it that way, do they? They say, let's merge the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Environment. We'll just put them together, swallow rando, and we'll be able to say efficiencies, right? Because when you merge anything, you get efficiencies. Well, not if the cost of all the staff goes up in that merger. If the cost of all the staff goes up in that merger, if you've just gone from using the Asians in the white vans and then you want to use the seasonal workers, there's a difference in the cost. But maybe the government's not so worried about the difference in the cost. I mean, they haven't modelled it yet. That'll come out in the budgeting process in May, and I'm very happy that the head of the department actually acknowledged today that the department has a monopoly on those services, because we as growers can't go somewhere else. We can't shop around for a better buy or a better service. Who's going to pay for that? Oh, the growers will. We could just hike up the services charges, and what we'll do is we'll say to horticulture, you know what, we might just give you a 277% increase on your plant export certificate to cover the cost of running the department. So the farmers will continue to pay. So that to me is some really low-hanging fruit. How about we all as a country acknowledge the importance of this sector, the importance of growing the economy, the things that the sector does beyond just plain GDP, and we all start saying, you know what, maybe we should all start paying for the Department of Agriculture and ensuring that it's really efficient so that our growers are actually cost effective when they go into their markets. Because we know we're so price sensitive, there's such a small margin there when we go out into those export markets that if it becomes a Department of Agriculture's charge that throws us over the other end of not actually being competitive in that market, well, it'll all become a moot point and it'll all be for nothing. So I just really, I wanted to finish on exactly what Busy finished on, which is this notion of social change. We need to have social change where the whole country, everyone who wants to eat Australian fruit or vegetables or any other Australian produce, who wants to live in a regional community, who wants to live in the city, who wants to live on the back of the risks that the growers take every single day, if we can get that social change, maybe we can actually go to the government and say, hey guys, how about you pay out of general revenue the cost of the Department of Agriculture? Maybe when we've got a country of people who support us, that we'll actually be able to affect that change. So I'll leave you with that.